Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Techno Talks here. So in today's video, we're going to be doing a nice little speed test between the iPhone 15 Pro on the right and the iPhone 14 Pro on the left. So what we're going to be doing in this video is going to be a nice little boot up test, and then we'll go ahead and open up some apps. Then we'll go ahead and do a nice little RAM management test, and after that we'll go ahead and end it off with a Geekbench 6 test just to see the scores that these devices get with the new chipset on the 15 Pro. And so for the specs, we do have the Apple A17 Pro chipset with 8GB of RAM this year, and we do have the A16 Bionic chipset on the 14 Pro with 6GB of RAM. So let's go ahead and see if the iPhone 15 Pro is better than the 14 Pro. In my opinion, we're not going to be seeing too big of a difference since these phones are definitely really powerful. Both of them are really strong and really powerful. But again, I still go ahead and do these every year. So let's go ahead and start off with a nice little boot up test in 3, 2, 1. Alright, and looking at both these devices from the front, you cannot tell a difference. If I didn't tell you before, if you were just looking at it like this, then you wouldn't even know which one is which. That's just how similar these phones are nowadays, and that was basically the same. So again, they did boot up at the same time, so no issues with that. Alright, so let me go ahead and open up these phones and let's move on to the app test. Alright, so here is the lineup for the apps that we have here, for the apps that we're going to be opening. And again, both these devices are connected to the same Wi-Fi, and both of them have closed out all the apps in the background. So without further ado, let's go ahead and open these up. Starting off with some simple apps that we already have preloaded on the devices, like the calculator, which was the 15 Pro, calendar, that was very similar, clock, again very similar, camera. That felt like the 14 Pro opened up the lens faster, but I'm not exactly sure on that. And again, if I do mess up on any of these, go ahead and let me know just to be 100%. Alright, so moving on to our social media apps like Instagram. That is going to be the 15 Pro just by a tad bit. So Twitter or X now. That is going to be the iPhone 15 Pro loading up the new tweets first. Groupon, that's going to be the 14 Pro, and the 15 Pro actually took a little longer. Espn, and this year supposedly we do have the better Wi-Fi receiver on the 15 Pro, and the 15 Pro was a little faster on Espn. Amazon, alright, that felt like the 15 Pro. eBay, that was the 14 Pro. YouTube, let's go ahead and see, and that seems like it was the 14 Pro. Starbucks, not really sure on that one, that was very similar. So moving on to our games now, we do have Smashy Road 1 to 2, and that is going to be the 15 Pro. If we do close out real quick, Temple Run 2. So did have some jitter on the 14 Pro, and that seems like the 15 Pro did load in first. Again, if you do have any app recommendations, I would really like to actually go ahead and change up these speed tests, because these apps really aren't the most overwhelming apps, and I would really love some new ideas for these speed tests from you guys to go ahead and test out with these devices, as these speed tests are getting very similar. If we do move on to Asphalt 9, alright, let's go ahead and see which one loads in first. That is going to be the 14 Pro. 15 Pro is still loading. Let's go ahead and close that. Alright, now moving on to our final game, which is Dead Trigger 2. Alright, let's go ahead and close out of that. Dead Trigger 2. And that is going to be the 14 Pro. So the 15 Pro did get stuck on that loading screen, and if we do click play at the same time, let's go ahead and see which one loads in first. And the 15 Pro did struggle with that. So let's go ahead and redo that real quick. Go ahead and close out with Dead Trigger 2 from both in 3, 2, 1. And that felt very similar, and then clicking play. And this time it's going to be very similar, but it feels like the 14 Pro is just a tad bit faster. And Let's see, and yes, it was the 14 Pro, but that was very similar. Alright, so let's go ahead and quickly move on to our apps again, just to see if any of them weren't in the background and they did close because of the RAM. I don't really think anything happened. The 14 Pro previously has done a great job with this. The 15 Pro has more RAM, so it should be good anyways. It should already keep all the apps open. And again, if you do have any other recommendations for these speed tests, I would really like to switch it up, as these apps really don't even matter to these phones anymore. They're very easy to open up. Any phone can open these. But if you do have recommendations for these tests, I would definitely like to take them. And again, it does seem like all of these apps have stayed open for both these devices. And yes, so everything has stayed open. Alright, so the 15 Pro was just a tad bit faster, but just by a couple milliseconds when opening these apps. Other than that, these devices are basically the same. Day-to-day usage, you're not going to see any difference. You might even have better performance with the 14 Pro, as my 15 Pro has been heating up a little bit. I've been having that overheating issue as well, especially when outside in Texas heat. But again, the 14 Pro is still a really good device, and if this wasn't something that I was doing, if I wasn't reviewing phones, I would definitely stay with the 14 Pro and maybe even the 13 Pro. That's just how similar these devices are getting now. Alright, so getting everything out of the way, let's go ahead and move on to our Geekbench 6 test, which I haven't done with the 15 Pro yet, and I would really like to see what it's like. And again, we can see that we do have 8 gigabytes of RAM with the 15 Pro and 6 gigabytes of RAM with the 14 Pro. We do have the Apple A17 Pro chipset, or the ARM chipset here, and then Apple A16 Bionic. They are both on 17.0.2, so they've been updated to the latest version. Other than that, let's go ahead and begin with our CPU benchmark. So let's go and run our CPU benchmark. Alright, so once these are done, I will get back to you. So this is actually pretty interesting, as we can see that we really don't have that big of a difference between the chipsets. So for the 14 Pro, on our single core, we did get 2630 and we did get 2871. On the 15 Pro multi-core, we got 6655 and we got 6963. So again, not too big of a difference between these phones. I did actually expect a better performance on the 15 Pro, just a tad bit more with these Geekbench results. But again, I guess this is how it is. But I'd like to say that I am comparing a 14 Pro with a 15 Pro, and 14 Pro was probably getting the highest scores out of all devices that I used last year, and now the 15 Pro is probably still going to be the king with that. Apple just makes great CPUs. Their phones are really powerful, but again, in day-to-day usage, when comparing to other phones as well, you really don't see a difference. Just like you saw in the speed test, for the past 2 years now, these speed tests really haven't been mattering that much. I do need to do some more stuff with it. If you do have any recommendations for what I could do so it can be a little more harder on the phones and we can actually see a difference, just let me know in the comments down below. But again, these phones basically were the same, other than the 15 Pro taking the Geekbench score and opening a couple apps a little faster by a couple milliseconds. So that'll basically wrap it up for this video. As always, if you did enjoy this video, make sure to like and subscribe, and see y'all in the next one.